The truth is, this video started as an analysis. I mean, that was it, really. That was the whole plan. It was supposed to be in a similar vein to my Easy A video, The Genius of 500 Days of Summer. Cute, right? We'll still get into that stuff. Character, point of view, structure. But I need to tell you now that this video takes a bit of an unexpected turn. We're going to explore the significance of intention, see just how severely art imitated life, and ask a question I never have. What if the unreliable narrator in a movie is the guy who wrote it? But first, a disclaimer. There are things that I've written before, entire sections that I've cut from other videos, some that never even made it past the script. Usually, I do this to protect people's privacy, or to prevent the perpetuation of information I just don't want to contribute to. But there have also been times where I have a belief about something that I want to voice, that I can make a case for, but am infuriatingly unable to fully 100% prove. For this reason, typically I would omit a good portion of this video, and I'll explain why I decided that I can't later, but I can't. Or I won't. I don't know. But it's important that you take what I talk about here with a grain of salt. I'll back up everything that I can as much as I can, but I want to emphasize that all thoughts and opinions are my own. Additional sources are linked below. Here's a quick spoiler warning. And for the love of God, if you have not seen the movie, please do not watch this video. If I get one more comment from someone annoyed that I didn't recap the entire plot, I might go off the rails. This is an analysis. If you want a summary, read the Wikipedia page or go to a commentary channel. I am not playing games. Speaking of playing games, I am incredibly excited to talk about Love and Pies, a cozy and casual mobile game. Follow Amelia as she restores her family's cafe, looks into the mystery of her mother's disappearance, and maybe finds love along the way. The aim of the game is to match ingredients to create pies or other baked goods to serve to your customers. The tips you earn help finance the upgrades and decorations for your cafe. To be clear, they did not send me this gameplay footage. This is a recording from my account on my phone. In order to authentically review the game, the Love and Pies team suggested I play until at least day 3. I am currently on day 20, and I am not slowing down. I'll be real with you guys, I don't usually jive with mobile games. With ADHD, I tend to get bored very, very quickly, but Love and Pies has become the exception. Unlike other games I've played, Love and Pies is so uniquely tailored to the individual experience, where you can focus on what you want to focus on. Like, if the romance plot isn't your thing, you can work on solving the mystery. If you're not there for the storyline, you can easily skip right past it. If you like competitions, they have them all the time. If you just want the relaxing, no-pressure game of matching baked goods together, there you go. My personal favorite part is getting to pick out the designs as you clean and restore the cafe. There's something so satisfying about seeing it all come together. The script is funny, there's so much attention to detail in the animation. It's clear a lot of love went into making this game. Love and Pies is totally free to download, so use my link, if not for the free gift, then for the ability to fully appreciate how impressive it is that I unlocked this cat. Thank you, Love and Pies, for sponsoring this video. After being dumped by the girl he believes to be his soulmate, hopeless romantic Tom Hansen reflects on their relationship to try and figure out where things went wrong and how he can win her back. This is the premise of 500 Days of Summer, directed by Marc Webb and written by Scott Neustadter and Michael Weber. For context, this movie was a big deal for Marc Webb. Before he directed the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man movies, and his lesser-known films, The Only Living Boy in New York, and Gifted, Marc Webb was mostly known for directing music videos. Granted, huge music videos with some artists at the very peak of their popularity, but 500 Days of Summer would be his first feature-length film. Marc was so determined to direct it that for his pitch, he made a literal scroll putting all of the non-linear days of the movie in chronological order. And yet, I'd argue this movie was an even bigger deal for screenwriters Scott Neustadter and Michael Weber. Full disclosure, I'm going to be referencing Scott more than Michael in this video. I don't want to devalue or take away from Michael's role, because they did write the script together and are listed as co-writers, as well as Marc Webb for the final draft, but it's important to tell you out of the gate that this is very much Scott's story. We're led through the plot by a seemingly omniscient narrator.
This is a story of boy meets girl.
We've seen this narrative device before in a variety of films, and it's not something that's confined to a specific genre. Often, the purpose of having a third-person narrator is to implement tone and structure while also filling in expositional blanks.
This is a story of an ordinary little boy named Charlie Bucket.
The teacher was, by choice, a solitary young woman.
Sometimes the narrator is another character in the film, set in the future or in a different world, recounting the story to someone else.
That day she was amazed to discover that when he was saying "as you wish," What he meant was, I love you.
And then there are narrators who are never seen or addressed, but are only ever a voice. This type of narrator has a one-way connection to the story and its characters, but ultimately exists above the film's plot, on our plane of reality, speaking directly to the audience like we're in the same room, like they're reading us a book that they've already read before.
She was known for her extreme secrecy. For example, none of the Tenenbaums knew she was a smoker, which she had been since the age of 12.
At a first glance, the narrator in 500 Days of Summer appears to check all of these boxes. We easily accept him as the guiding, knowing voice of this film, as an omniscient figure who is above our story. But this is only an illusion, a mimicry. The narrator is the first, well, technically the second, lie we are told. What is incredibly significant to note is that 500 Days of Summer is from Tom's point of view. This is most memorably evident in how Tom idealizes his relationship with Summer, which is the edifice of the film's narrative structure, and later Tom's growth as he gradually takes off his rose-colored glasses and sees things more objectively. We'll get more into Tom's character soon, but what should be addressed now is just how heavily Tom exists in his own mind. This man overthinks almost everything, and he has a severe tendency to romanticize his life, a habit which is strongly influenced by pop culture, specifically movies and music. Tom wants his life to be a romantic comedy. To Tom, Summer is his soulmate in his romantic comedy. But as the film progresses and Tom begins to realize Summer is not the one, these ideals and delusions slowly crumble. So the narrator, along with these whimsical flashbacks, they are all constructed from Tom's imagination, either subconsciously or as a way for him to look back on the relationship. It's not enough for Tom to romanticize the relationship. He has to romanticize the way he processes the relationship. Even knowing how it ends, Tom still twists it into something idyllic and cinematic. Granted, there are a few potential issues with this theory, so let's debunk them. It might seem like the narrator knows more than Tom, like he has that godlike omniscience, but this too is an illusion. The narrator lives in the present timeline. Now, most of the film is told jumping back and forth through time, flashbacks within flashbacks, but the closest thing we can call the actual present is day 488. This is the fake-out scene we see at the beginning of the film and come back to near the end. And because this is Tom's present, we can also assume this is the narrator's present. As Tom is much further along in his character development in this time, this explains why the narrator has foresight over the outcome of the film.
But you should know up front, this is not a love story.
The narrator is also able to bring growth of Tom's character, that day 488 Tom would have developed, but day 6 or day 238 Tom would not yet have.
And a total misreading of the movie, The Graduate.
What it doesn't explain is how the narrator / Tom knows so much about Summer.
And her round-trip commute to work averaged 18.4 double takes per day.
How could Tom possibly know that Summer's part-time job in high school increased ice cream sales, or that her senior quote increased record sales in Michigan? The answer to that is he doesn't. When I say this movie is from Tom's perspective, essentially this entire movie is from Tom's perspective. We only perceive Summer through this biased and often unreliable lens that extends to moments we easily accept as reality when they're not. Like, the brief snapshots of Summer's past relationships are not the actual people she dated. They are images of who Tom imagines them to be.
In high school, there was Marcus.
Quarterback / homecoming king.
No, he was a rower.
None of what we see of Summer's life before Tom is real. It is all created and warped by Tom's mind. Initially, I thought at the very least the few childhood flashbacks we were shown of Summer had to be based in fact. But even those are not exempt from this rule. Again, all of these moments led by the narrator, they're entirely fictitious events conceived in Tom's head. We see them morphed by his hopeless romantic ideals, his own fears and insecurities, but also by how Tom likes imagining Summer to be. They're an amalgamation of inferences developed from details Tom knows about Summer and his own polarizing emotions in view of her from the present timeline. Like, Tom knows Summer has shorter hair, so he fabricates a story of why she chooses to have shorter hair, but inadvertently injects his own bitterness into the narrative.
She'd only loved two things, her long dark hair. The second was how easily she could cut it off and feel nothing.
Because Summer does not mirror Tom's feelings, he chooses to imagine her in childhood as having a cold and unfeeling quality to her personality. Screenwriter Scott Neustadter addressed this in a Q&A.
It was just sort of like an encapsulation that's probably completely false, because it's, again, all coming from his perspective of like who this person is. She's someone who would love something and then get rid of it like that in 1 second and not even think about it. It's again, something that like he's projecting into the world. I'm sure that never happened.
But this lens goes beyond how Tom perceives Summer. It also extends to how he perceives other people perceive Summer. In a very real sense, Tom sees Summer as more than a human being, or less, depending on how you view it. To Tom, Summer is not simply the love interest in his story, she is the soulmate archetype, a position that is inevitable, irreplaceable, and wholly remarkable. Or, as Tom describes it, she is the one.
Summer Finn, just another girl. Except she wasn't.
And because Summer is special to him, she has to be special to everyone. So he fabricates stories that show off her specialness.
Every apartment Summer rented was offered at an average rate of 9.2% below market value.
The intention of these sequences is to show that Summer is different, that Summer is unique.
It was a rare quality, this Summer effect.
Though through this narrator, Tom does retrospectively mix up some details. While Tom obviously gets his own hometown of Margate, New Jersey correct,
Tom Hansen of Margate, New Jersey.
He mixes up where Summer is from.
Summer Finn of Shinnecock, Michigan.
Summer is from Michigan.
Summer just moved here from...
Michigan.
Right, Michigan, right.
But Shinnecock, Michigan is not a real place. This lapse in knowledge on a very basic detail of Summer's life is one of the first hints we get that Tom doesn't really see her for who she is, or at least that he doesn't focus on the right things. There is, however, a Shinnecock, New York, which is only a state away from Tom's home state, potentially explaining his association with the name. Ironically, this scene of Summer on the bike in Michigan was actually filmed in the city where Tom is from. Granted, this was most likely done out of convenience reasons, but there's such a unique added realism to the notion that Tom, when picturing Summer riding a bike in a hometown he's presumably never been to, fills the background with a street he may be somewhat familiar with. It's this fluidity of structure where the film shines the brightest. Screenwriters Scott Neustadter and Marc Webb have openly admitted that the non-linear structure is what, more than anything else, made their script stand out. Structuring many of the scenes to go from euphoric highs to depressing lows keeps the energy of the film constantly engaging. Beyond the narrator, the scenes are still easy to follow because the way they're structured is so human, with Tom's own thoughts, feelings, and stream of consciousness dictating the order of events as he reflects on the relationship in real time. Though this isolated perspective wasn't always the case, there are a few scenes in the script, some of which they even shot, that lean into exploring Summer's point of view. Screenwriter Marc Webb said, "We kicked around the idea that Summer would stop the movie after a certain scene and go, 'That's not how that happened.' Then she would take control and we'd see her version of what happened." This execution changed a little in the script, but still included brief scenes of Summer negatively reacting to moments Tom had previously interpreted as positive.
Please don't talk to me. Please don't talk to me.
How's your weekend?
Another instance is the documentary interview sequence, where Tom, his friends, and his boss give their opinions on love. Several characters were cut from these little interviews, including a part with Tom's little sister Rachel, which I wish they had left in.
That's a pretty complex question. Philosophers, poets, scientists, everybody has a theory, don't they?
Summer's character also had a line that they filmed, but ultimately did not include in the movie.
I think that my feelings on the topic have been covered. Can we talk about something else?
Of Summer's point of view, Marc Webb told Go Into the Story, "It was a fun idea, but it violated the logic of the movie because this is entirely from his point of view. There's been some criticism about why we don't know more about what Summer is thinking. Why is she just this pixie fantasy dream? Anything that's not in the movie is because Tom doesn't remember it." Scott Neustadter added, "Not just because he doesn't remember it, but also because he doesn't know. Nor did he bother to ask. And it's all his fault. All of it." So they cut both of these scenes with Summer to stay fully true to Tom's narrative. This is significant because Tom's re-examination of his own perspective is vital to the film's resolution and his own growth. 500 Days of Summer uniquely evades needing to address its lack of Summer's perspective because its lack of Summer's perspective is kind of the point. Tom likes that they have shared interests, that she already likes what he likes.
I said I love the Smiths. You've You have good taste in
You
music.
like this, Smith?
Yeah.
She likes Magritte and Hopper. And we talked about banana fish for like 20 minutes. We're so compatible, it's insane.
Which, yeah, on its own is normal. But even when Tom describes the things he loves about Summer, he keeps it limited to physical quirks and attributes.
I love the way she sometimes licks her lips before she talks. I love the sound of her laugh.
When Tom expands beyond these things, he goes straight to how Summer affects him.
I love how she makes me feel. Like anything's possible. Like, I don't know, like life is worth it.
Nowhere does he list anything about her personality, her thoughts, or who she is as a person. Summer asks Tom all about his dreams and goals, but we never hear about hers.
I don't know, like I'd make them notice.
How would you make them notice?
As the film is from Tom's perspective, he only remembers what he chooses to, suggesting that if these conversations even happened, they are things about Summer that just aren't that significant to him. If we examine his lens, dialogue, and the conversations that are shown, we can see what matters most to Tom is how Summer looks, how he imagines Summer to be, how Summer aligns with his own already existing interests, and how Summer makes him feel. Tom may believe he is in love, he may be in love, but if we break down that feeling, the core of it is superficial at best. After a breakup, it's very easy to spiral into asking questions like, why wasn't I good enough? Or what could I have done better? Or bargaining, like by saying if I was different in this way, it would have worked out. None of these rabbit holes are especially productive. But the truth is, Tom and Summer were never right for each other. The Tom at the start of the movie would never go up to a girl at the deli and ask her about the book she's reading. But the type of person that Summer would end up with is the type of person who would. And if we're being really honest here, the Tom at the end of the movie still probably wouldn't. He does ask Autumn out, but even in the moment that's supposed to convey his growth, he isn't even the one to initially strike up conversation.
Are you interviewing?
Sorry?
Are you interviewing for the position?
And yet, this same logic works on his level too, because the type of person Tom would be with is the type of person who would initiate conversation with him. Maybe we could just write this off as a lack of confidence. But we could also make an argument for intrinsic compatibility. Summer is impulsive and adventurous. Summer is typically very honest with her thoughts. Tom isn't. Summer is friendly and confident. Summer is open-minded but cynical when it comes to love, which contradicts Tom's beliefs. Another differing quality between them is that Summer rarely second-guesses herself. Tom second-guesses and overthinks everything. The script emphasizes their contrasts in personality by drawing attention to the differences in their apartments. With the line, "From the disparity of stuff," we should get the sense that unlike Tom, whose room reflects his interest in architecture, Summer is all over the place. In her mid-20s, Summer moved to Los Angeles, a city full of creative, ambitious people, and she did so predominantly out of boredom.
Boredom, mostly. Want to try something new and exciting.
Well, clearly, you've come to the right place.
In contrast, Tom has been stuck at the same job that he doesn't even like for years and resides in stagnancy. And Summer doesn't like this about him.
Always wanted to write greeting cards?
No, I don't even want to do it now.
Well, you should do something else then.
Summer doesn't like Tom's lack of ambition and confidence in himself. There's a subtle but persistent emphasis on this throughout the film from their very first conversation.
I studied to be an architect, actually.
You did? That's cool. What happened there?
It didn't work out. The holidays came up, so work was...
You still working for Vance?
Yeah. I write greeting cards.
But Tom could be a really great architect if he wanted to be.
It's not about what his dream job is or how much it pays. It's the fact that Tom prefers doing a 9-to-5 at a job he has no passion for. It's that he either gave up on what he actually wants to do or prefers never trying over failing. It's that his insecurities outweigh his passion. Again, we don't get to learn what Summer is passionate about, but from what we do know of her, we can surmise that she wouldn't do that. We do know that she doesn't stay at the card company for much more than a year. Summer's confidence may be something that Tom is attracted to because he admires it or wants to feel it himself. But for Summer, Tom's lack of confidence has the opposite effect.
You can make something that lasts forever, like a greeting card.
500 Days of Summer lives in extremities. The emotions are always intense, echoing the highs and lows of Summer and Tom's relationship. And because Tom's happiness is largely dependent on his status with Summer, he's either on top of the world or absolutely miserable. What we see of the in-between is very brief. These hot and cold emotions only prop up the duality of how Tom regards Summer, though it would make sense for Tom's feelings for Summer to fully mirror his feelings about Summer, flickering between adoring Summer and loathing her.
I love how she makes me feel.
I hate Summer.
There is never actually a stage in their relationship in which Tom doesn't simultaneously love and hate her. Because even at his happiest, when Tom openly adores Summer, in that same moment he also resents her for having so much power over him. He loves her, but he hates her for not loving him. And at Tom's worst, in his post-breakup depression, he completely idolizes Summer. When he badmouths her to his friends and talks about how much he hates her, he still sends her an email with the goal of getting her back, and later agrees to get coffee and falls right back into it. Granted, the core of his resentment towards Summer is never fairly founded, but then again, neither is his love for her in the first place. Tom more than just feels emotions deeply. He throws himself completely into them at every polarity. When he's happy, a mundane activity like going to work becomes a celebratory, choreographed parade with random people on the street joining in his joy. And when he's sad, he sinks into depressing music, commits to bed rot, eats a lot of junk food, and sees his own downfall projected in foreign movies. Interestingly, we see a lot of pop culture influence Tom's actions, as well as fuel and deepen his emotions. Because even when he's sad, there's an element of something performative there, not as if he's acting out of instinct, but instead doing what he thinks he should do, mimicking actions he's seen in movies from fictional characters. You could argue there is a part of Tom that masochistically enjoys feeling bad, likes leaning into his sadness. It serves to reinforce his own victimization. Fetishizing his emotions is also another way that Tom further romanticizes his own life.
I got a great idea.
Indulging in his sadness may have been a page taken right out of screenwriter Scott Neustadter's book.
I am the kind of person that would I love to listen to depressing music because it makes me feel good.
But in fairness, almost every page of Tom's character and 500 Days of Summer was taken out of Scott's book. Technically, if we're going by his own estimates and the director's commentary, 75% of the events in the film happened. Scott Neustadter, for all intents and purposes, is Tom Hansen. He's never tried to hide that. For better or worse, Scott has always been very upfront that 500 Days of Summer is about his life. Now, unlike Tom, Scott didn't want to be an architect. He wanted to be a writer. But like Tom and his career in architecture, it wasn't really working out. In an interview with Go Into the Story, Scott said, "I had always wanted to be a writer, I just never thought it was a very practical way to make a living. And I wasn't brave enough to go out to LA, wait tables, eke out a living while working on the craft or whatever. So I went the development route instead. I was hired out of college to be the story editor at the company, which basically meant I was the in-house reader." This is actually where Scott and Michael met, at Tribeca Productions. Scott worked in development, and Michael became a development intern. They would have lunch up on the roof and talk about scripts. It was Michael's idea that they try to write one together. And they did, and people liked it, but not enough to actually make it into a film. Scott said, "The truth is, having written a script that was funny, that people liked, but that didn't go anywhere, it kind of proved my point about this not being a very practical way to make a living. And now I was 25 and starting to think maybe working at a movie company wasn't either. So I applied to graduate school in England. And when they took me, I quit my job and moved to a continent on which I knew no one to study a discipline of which I knew even less."
Why did you really go to...
I really went to meet girls and to go to concerts.
Yeah, if you had an American accent in London would be a good...
I always wanted to travel, and I went to work right out of school. And
you needed a reason to say you were going. It was really to discover obscure bands before everyone else did.
Yeah.
It was a crazy move, but I was in the mood for something crazy. I was pretty much done with the movie business and writing when, and this is true, the very first day in England, I met the girl who would provide much of the basis of Summer. Scott wrote in the shooting script book of 500 Days of Summer, "I had quit the movie business where I'd worked as a development exec for the past 4 years, started the search for a legitimate, practical career, and made peace with the fact that I would never be the writer I had kinda, sorta, always since I was a fetus wanted to be. And I was fine with this, really, because at that time, at long last, I had finally met the one. I didn't need screenplays and movies, dreams, and ambitions. Instead, I had this girl, and she would save me. And in a way, I guess she did." While the movie is a striking execution of the common advice taught in every screenwriting 101 class, to write what you know, the truth is, sometimes it's difficult to separate Scott from Tom. And sometimes it really shows. In 500 Days of Summer, there is a deliberate, frequent emphasis on how Tom is a nice guy.
Relax, Hansen. You're one of the good ones.
Point is,
You're the best guy I know.
This focus goes far beyond Tom's unreliable perspective. It comes from other characters. It extends from the writers. They deeply want us to know this about Tom. There's a line from the original script conveying the same sentiment that is just so fascinating to me. It says, "The office sings happy birthday to a female coworker. When they get to the part about her name, Tom is the only one who knows it. Everyone else just there for the cake." Now, the female coworker is not significant to the plot. We don't see this coworker and Tom interact. This relationship doesn't matter until the rewrite, where they added in her wedding and bothered to give this woman a name, because it's not important. It's ironic that it's not important, but it's not important. What's important is the audience understanding that Tom isn't like the other guys in the office. Tom is nice. Tom respects women. I mean, he knows this woman's name, even though she's not actually given one, because, again, it doesn't actually matter. I find it so performative and contrived and almost meta. There's such a lack of self-awareness on the writer's end that directly runs parallel to the film's subject matter. This isn't Tom trying to convince the audience that he's a nice guy. This is the writers trying to convince the audience that Tom is a nice guy. And let's talk about nice guys, because this line unwittingly serves as a microcosm for a much larger message. Regarding his relationship with Summer, Tom sees his own intentions as pure and virtuous. He believes his love for Summer is genuine and well-intentioned, and because of that, he feels more than simply deserving of her love, but entitled to it. Everyone else is just there for the cake, but not Tom. Tom's the only one who knows her name. Except, again, he doesn't actually. In the earlier, happier days of their situationship, there's a scene in which Summer brings Tom back to her apartment for the first time. Later, they're laying down, and Summer begins to tell Tom about a recurring dream she has.
Then I realize I'm completely alone.
It's an intimate moment where Summer shares something personal, but we don't even get to hear all of it because Tom isn't even listening.
Tom began to realize that these weren't stories routinely told.
Tom doesn't think about what the dream means for Summer. He only considers what her telling it means for him.
He could feel the wall coming down. He wondered if anyone else had made it this far.
He's capable of recognizing that Summer telling him about it is significant to her, but he can only see it in the scope of how it affects him. And when she tells him she's never told anyone that before, he delivers the cringiest line in the entire movie.
I guess I'm not just anybody.
In the script, it's even worse. The scene direction in this scene says, Tom's face changes as he's hit with a realization. Yes, Summer has chosen to let him in. It's beginning, on Tom's face, determined to close the deal. I mean, close the deal? Ugh, God, it's hard to not read that as just so slimy and manipulative. He's not even viewing Summer as a human being, but as a challenge, a game he can override. I don't think there are necessarily villains in this movie, but this scene does not paint Tom in a good light, even from his own distorted, unreliable point of view. But, incredibly, this wasn't obvious to the screenwriter. In the director's commentary, they touch on this scene, and, surprisingly, Scott argues in Tom's defense. Immediately, pretty much everyone disagrees with him, pointing out why Tom is in the wrong. And because Tom is a thinly veiled stand-in for Scott, I can't lie, it's a tough watch.
He thinks of it in terms of himself, not in terms of the relationship.
Because he's selfish.
Like, he says, I guess I'm not just anybody. It's like a sort of a vain...
it's possessive.
Possessive, exactly, notion of this relationship. And I think that you have to get beyond that if you're gonna learn how to successfully navigate a relationship.
Being in love with somebody is not about owning them.
Mm-hmm.
But to that end, I think he's still a firm believer in what he believes. I mean, in the karaoke scene, he says, I think you're wrong. Mm-hmm. And in this, he's going to set out to prove her wrong. And he's going to work at it. And this is a example of maybe I'm scoring some points. And I agree that he's definitely thinking about himself and how he can gain access and all that stuff. But I still think that the end game for him is I'm going to convince her that love is going to work.
Mm-hmm. But that's exactly it. He's got an end game.
Mm-hmm.
Love, in my humble, not so humble opinion, shouldn't be about an agenda or an end game. It should be present, and it should kind of
flow.
Happen how it happens. Yeah, flow.
Yeah.
In a talk given a few years later, Scott referenced this exact moment in the film. But instead of standing by his previous interpretation of the scene, he changed stances, using similar language from the director's commentary.
Relationships and romance and love are not one-sided. But for this person, he's very much, it's all about him. And he's not even listening to her when she's describing, like, you know, something that she's never told anyone before in her life. His first sort of response is like, well, then I must be pretty special that you're telling me. And it's like, it's not about you, dude.
This begs the question, why? Did the altering opinions genuinely sway how Scott perceived the scene? Or was he just repeating lines that he doesn't believe in? Are there other scenes that he wrote thinking Tom was not at fault? And if so, when did he change his opinion? Is it possible that he wrote the entire script believing Tom was the hero and Summer was the villain? Is he getting credit for writing a nuanced portrait of unrequited love when he originally set out to write a revenge movie? But maybe we should first ask, is it possible for a writer to misinterpret their own writing? Death of the Author, coined by Roland Barthes in 1967, is an approach to media analysis that fully negates the author's opinion and intentions and encourages individual interpretation of that person's work. And I want to get more into that, because it is a valid way to critique media. And there are paintings and songs that are bigger than their artists, and there are books and movies that deserve more than their writers. And God, I do really love Harry Potter, but instinctively, just as I am naturally, I tend to fall on the other end of the spectrum. I believe that intention matters, that it inevitably drips into what we make and what we take in. Sometimes I get caught up in thinking that while creative works are welcome to individual interpretation, when it comes down to it, there is only one explanation or reason or meaning, one fixed, true, intended answer dictated at the time of creation by the author, the writer, the artist, and I'll linger by the door to hear them say it. That answer appears to be very clear for 500 Days of Summer. Scott spells it out in interviews and Q&As, and honestly, it's everything I expected to hear. Summer said she didn't want a relationship. Tom put her on a pedestal. I'll level with you. I went into this part of the video thinking I'd check a box and continue on my merry way. The truth is, I didn't expect to be surprised. And at first, I wasn't. At a first glance, it all seems very straightforward. There are so many instances of Scott unambiguously explaining this, emphasizing where Tom is wrong, insisting that there are no villains in this movie.
We wanted to kind of show you that that's a problem. If you think that someone's going to enter your life and change your life, you have to do it yourself. She gives him sort of like the gift of, you have to look at yourself and your own failings, and you are responsible for all the bad in your life, not anyone else.
And that should be good enough, right? He couldn't have been clearer. The quotes are all there. That's that. End of topic. Let's talk about the movie's color theory. I want to, but I can't. The thing is, I don't believe him. I'm not sure that this is the true intention Scott Neustadter had when he wrote 500 Days of Summer, because underneath this loud, presentable, acceptable voice, there's another one that's much quieter, and it's restrained and hard to make out, but sometimes it slips through the cracks and you can hear it. Let's start with what's hidden in plain sight. In the first few seconds of the film, there is a disclaimer that says, "Note, the following is a work of fiction. Any resemblance to persons living or dead is purely coincidental. Especially you, Jenny Beckman, bitch."
So, who is Jenny Beckman?
Okay, there is a lot to unpack here. If you're seeing this film for the first time, it's very possible you're going in only knowing the barest bones of the premise, which is a guy looks back at his relationship after being dumped. So you might laugh at this line. You don't know what happens yet, or what has happened with the screenwriter and this woman. And naturally, you may then wonder, wow, what horrible thing did this woman do? So already, this text primes the audience to distrust Summer and see her character as the villain. I mean, let's remember, this isn't a character name-calling another character. This is the writer, basically the god of this story, the omniscient figure who knows and dictates what's going to happen. That guy is popping in to essentially say, the woman this movie is based off of is a terrible person. Here's why. This message is incredibly confusing because it is so completely antithetical with the movie's theme. So, for the people watching the movie for the first time, this line might come across as comedic at the start of the film. It might get a positive reaction from an audience. Or for the people rewatching, it may feel tongue-in-cheek, a sarcastic, well-meaning ode to the woman who inspired this film. That's what I always thought, and I think that's how most people see it. That's what I have to believe is the reason why the director, Marc Webb, chose to leave it in. Whenever I watched 500 Days of Summer, way before this channel existed, these words frustrated me so much. Not because I didn't like them, but because I couldn't understand them. It was like a magic eye poster I could never look at the right way. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't read these words as ironic or playful to the woman they're mentioning. And like in my head, logically, I knew it wasn't serious. It was obviously a joke. It had to be, because if it wasn't, this message would contradict the entire movie, and that was impossible. That made even less sense to me. I mean, how could a screenwriter misinterpret their own script? They couldn't, and I was sure of that, but I still couldn't see it. And now I know why. The truth is, the impetus of these lines was not irony or lightheartedness or anything remotely well-intentioned. In a Q&A, Scott said, "It started from a place of anger. Jenny Beckman, bitch, etc. But by the end of the movie, both character and author have embraced the idea that there are no villains in this story. You cannot fault someone because they do not feel the same." And I can almost accept that. But as much as I conceptually like that sentiment, it doesn't make any sense. Or at least, his words don't appear to align with his actions. If writing the script only started from a place of anger, why wouldn't they go back and delete this part post-epiphany? It's not like they didn't have the time. This script had over 15 drafts. Why would they still feel the need to call out Scott's ex at the beginning if he had later embraced the idea that there are no villains? I mean, if this is true, if they were genuinely trying to make a statement about Scott's own growth from an authorial standpoint, why didn't they give it a resolution? Where was the corrective end card before the credits saying, "Never mind, I was wrong. Sorry, Jenny, it was unfair for me to fault you because you don't feel the same"? If this is actually this woman's name, in my eyes, this is by far Scott's worst defense. Now, a substantial portion of this argument stands on the foundation that this name is not an alias. Because if it is, if this is a made-up name and there was a way for me to know that, this section of the video would be a lot shorter. So, is this actually the woman's name? Short answer, I don't know. Yeah, sure, the IMDb trivia page says she's a real person, but that's not exactly an academic source. So, grain of salt. If that is her name, I'm convinced she either changed it or wiped herself off the internet. Can't imagine why. If this part of the script came from a place of anger, like Scott said, if he really wanted to cause hurt, why would he bother saying a name at all if it wasn't hers? Where's the smug satisfaction in that?
Jenny Beckman. Who is Jenny Beckman, Scott?
She's watching right now, I know that.
Yes.
Hopefully she's not listening to this, because we're going to have a lot to say.
So this is the...
Regarding Scott, he has never publicly confirmed that it is her name, but he's never denied it either. This is what we know.
I had to do it. We were not talking. We were not friends. We were not in touch. Don't get that. Yeah, we weren't at all. Legal sort of said, make sure this is kosher, because there's a lot of stuff in there that's legit. So I had them read the script. She read it and she liked it and said it was totally fine. We stayed in touch through the thing, then it was like, hey, they're actually gonna make this thing, believe it or not, which when your ex-boyfriend emails you usually think no one's ever gonna read or see it, so it's fine, but now it's like becoming a thing. And I don't know if they ever saw the movie, to be honest with you, because at least with the England girl, we were Facebook friends up until the release of the movie overseas, and then the day it came out, I was defriended on Facebook. So I'm assuming that that's connected somehow, but I don't know.
What Scott fails to mention in these interviews is that 5 days before the international release of 500 Days of Summer, he wrote an op-ed for the UK-based tabloid newspaper, The Daily Mail, and titled it, 500 Days of Summer, Revenge is writing a film about the girl who dumped you. I mean, where do we begin with this? We could focus on the specific word choice and how revenge implies retaliation for being slighted or wronged in the first place. Revenge is highlighted again in the lead, which starts with, "It is surely the greatest act of revenge in the history of cinema." It's not like one time is an accident here, but twice is really, it's pointed. And this word feels so contradictory to the previous quotes. Because really, how is this the same guy? How do you go from this to this? There are a lot of angles Scott could have approached this article from. He decided to recount the very real relationship the film was based on. He begins with, "The opening credits for my film include the standard legal disclaimer that any resemblance to people living or dead is purely coincidental." But then it adds, "especially you, Jenny Beckman, bitch." I don't want to say it, but you know what I'm saying. Now, Scott isn't directly cruel to this woman in his article. He appears self-effacing, acknowledging his embarrassing puppy-like devotion, and he even outwardly recognizes that it was always patently clear that she saw no future for them. Technically, if you don't count the quote Scott pulled from the film, the worst thing he calls her in this article is aloof. It's in what isn't said, and the subtext of some things that are said, that I get hung up on. Like, Scott addresses his awareness of the vast speculation on the internet about whether this is actually her name. And though this would have been the perfect opportunity to say that he made it up, whether he did or didn't, to alleviate potential online harassment to this woman or other women who share the same name, Scott instead makes it a point to neither confirm nor deny, adding, "I'm saying nothing." Though he does later include that their names were changed for the movie. But if that's ambiguous, don't worry, he throws in the name of the university where they met. And in case that isn't specific enough, he goes on to break down the program, area of studies, and even the month and the year they were in attendance. He was 32 years old when this article came out, if you're curious. Yes, Scott acknowledges the one-sidedness of the relationship and quickly redacts his previous belief that it was a form of divine intervention after she breaks it off with him. But there's no manic pixie dream girl rhetoric. There's no mention of pedestals and unrealistic expectations and the dangers of attributing your own happiness to one single person. He doesn't have to spoil the movie, which gets spoiled in the first 5 seconds anyway, but at the very least, shouldn't these things be at the forefront of his mind, influencing the article's tone? Instead, there's this passive-aggressive tone laced throughout that becomes almost mocking at times. It's a lingering bitterness, contradicting his alleged growth, contradicting his account of how he came to view the relationship during the process of writing the script. I mean, even with some wiggle room, this article came out well over a year after the shooting script was complete, and 3 years after their first final draft. And yet, Scott still feels compelled to insist that he's 2 years into another relationship and has, quote, never been happier. Like, literally, right after saying that, he adds, "One curious footnote, though. After writing the screenplay, I met up with Jenny for the first and only time since we broke up. We had dinner in Venice Beach, California. We talked about life, friends, everything, but not about what had happened between us. I gave her the script to read on the flight back to London. Sometime later, she wrote me a letter. She loved the story, she said. It had surprised and moved her because she really related to Tom. Yes, incredibly, Jenny hadn't recognized herself as Summer at all." To be clear, this isn't tongue-in-cheek either. Jenny telling Scott that she related to Tom infuriated him.
But they were very nice, and they read it, and they liked it, and they said, very interesting. Probably not how they saw it, but that was fine. And one of them related very much to the Tom character, which was infuriating to me.
This final send-off line of the article still comes from a place of anger. Where is this supposed growth? Where did it go? If it was ever authentic at all. Was the Daily Mail op-ed a factor in this woman's decision to unfriend him on Facebook? I have no idea. What I can surmise is that if Scott knew she unfriended him on Facebook the day the movie came out in the UK, it implies he made sure to know the day the movie would be released in a country he does not live in, and actively went to her Facebook page the day she was able to see it. It also implies he'd been checking her profile each day before that, because he was able to say with certainty that she unfriended him specifically on the day of the UK release. Not the week of, not around the time of, on the day of.
And then the day it came out, I was defriended on Facebook. So.
But don't worry, according to his Daily Mail piece, he was able to liberate himself from his own misery a long time ago, right? And while we're at it, let's talk about Facebook. A couple times while I was rummaging through interviews, I came across the mention of a Facebook page.
You did so many interesting, or the studio did so many interesting marketing plays on this thing. Didn't they set up a Facebook page for Jenny Beckman?
Well, maybe they did, and maybe we did.
Maybe someone did?
The page in question is still up today, and its profile picture includes someone who appears to look a lot like Scott Neustadter, and a young woman who I can only presume is the person Summer was inspired by. And to be completely clear, whoever made this page did not have the decency to blur this woman out. I did in this video for privacy reasons. It's also due to privacy reasons that I'm not linking this page in the source list below.
Someone did. And what happened with that?
Well, it might be a real person, actually. She's on Facebook.
Okay, we're gonna keep this speculative. Do I believe this is Jenny Beckman's actual Facebook page? No, of course not. Do I believe that the marketing team that worked on 500 Days of Summer made this Facebook page? Not at all. Those people are professionals, and this is shoddy craftsmanship at best. Do I believe that this woman took a selfie with Scott's phone during their situationship, and that's what this picture is? Absolutely. Can I prove it? No, I cannot. Can I prove that Scott made this Facebook page? No. Can I prove that he has anything to do with it at all? No. I cannot fathom who would have access to this page other than the parties in the picture, unless this was potentially a friend they sent it to. I do know Scott was active on social media around the film's release. I can prove he knew of the discourse.
In order to write on the wall, she has to accept them as friends. And I don't know who's doing that. Because if I was in charge, I would be saying no to most of these people. Because there's a lot of people who are like in defense of her. And I guess that's okay now. But at the time, it was like, what? That can't be. No way.
There is something to be said for the hateful comments on this account's wall. Whoever made this page, what was the point? 500 Days of Summer is the first movie I've encountered where I disagree with the writer's meaning. And by disagree, I don't mean I don't like their interpretation, so I reject it. The point of view and events of 500 Days of Summer align so heavily with Scott's own life that when I disagree with his interpretation and intentions, I am not disagreeing with how Scott viewed his script. I am disagreeing with how he viewed his life. When we peel back this film's layers to its genesis to get to that one true answer, it becomes clear the waters were muddy to begin with. Where does Tom begin and Scott end? What are you supposed to do when the writer is an unreliable narrator? Guys, this one really took me out. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to support me, the best #1 thing you can do is subscribe. Please, it means the world to me. Oh, this was a long one. This one hurt, guys.